What's going on, Riverside Youth? Man, we are here for another episode on the Youth Podcast, and it's me, Pastor Josh, and we got my good friend,
Juan Jr.
Juan Jr. And so we're excited for this episode. And a couple weeks ago at our youth nights, I preached a message, and at the end of the message, we kind of had every student just write on a card. And so we got a stack of cards here.
A lot of them.
We just went over these, and basically what I had students write on these cards were just something like their sin that they're dealing with, which, you know, we all got sin. We all got stuff going on in our life. And so there was a lot of stuff just on this card, and we're not going to go through all of these because I think there's like 60 to 70 cards here.
Yeah, there's probably about 6 or 7 podcasts in that.
Yeah, seriously. So there's a lot of stuff in this, but I think I just want to start. I just had you read through these. What are your just initial thoughts? Like, just off the top of your head, like whatever God is speaking to you, like what do you think about all this stuff that's going on?
It was kind of heartbreaking, just because there were a lot of different topics on there. I mean, there was suicide.
Yeah.
There was lust. There was sexual things. There was people smoking weed and dealing with drugs and temptation and loss of identity and not knowing who they are or being somebody else around certain people. A lot of cussing, a lot of relationship problems with family members. It was a lot to take in, you know, at once.
Yeah.
Because it was so many different topics. You're like, oh wow,
Mm-hmm.
you know, it's just a lot to take in.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of rough to believe that our youth is struggling like that, but it's not surprising either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so kind of just what I want to talk about, because I think just all those things that you just touched on right there just relates to this idea of kind of integrity. And what I mean by that is like having moral standards for yourself. And I think humans lack that.
And being able to stand up for them.
Yes, I think we lack the ability to have our own standards for our life. We think we'll have standards for a relationship maybe, or standards for what I want to eat in life. But I think we need to have standards for everything else. Like, who do I want to be? How do I want to act? What do I want to get involved in? And I think a lot of these things is cussing. You can have a standard for cussing. Just don't do it.
Right.
You can have a standard for drugs. I don't want to go where drugs are because I know I'll get involved with it. And so let's talk about just integrity. How have you had it in your life? Maybe standards. Maybe you put up boundaries. How have you maybe navigated that in your life?
So, 2 words that are real dear to me, okay? Honor and integrity.
Yeah.
You can't really read it because it looks sideways, but if you do read them this way,
Yeah.
this one does say honor,
Okay.
and this one does say integrity.
Yeah.
The reason I had done that was because at one point when I had my custom shop, I was making so much money and it was going so fast that I like lost track of my family, and it almost cost me my marriage.
Wow.
So when I shut it down, God had kind of like put it back in my path like 10 years later.
Yeah.
And I was so worried about going down the wrong path again that I had tattooed honor and integrity on here.
Yeah.
Knowing that if I was ever to be like in that spotlight again with, you know, photos and newspaper articles and magazine articles, I would always remember to try to live my life with integrity.
Mm-hmm.
So integrity for me was, you know, doing the right thing when you know it might cost you everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, sometimes you have to come clean on some stuff, and you have to have that hard conversation.
Yeah.
You have to call your pastor and be like, hey, I don't think I should preach, you know, this month because I fell into a trap of watching pornography again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I've had to have those conversations,
Yeah.
like on a Wednesday on my way to church. Like,
Yeah.
not comfortable,
Right.
but it's something that if you don't expose, it's just going to beat you up even more.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So having a standard for yourself and being able to stand on that no matter what is living your life with integrity.
Right.
You know what I mean? Knowing that, like, it might cost me a relationship, but, you know, I can't hang out with you. You know what I mean? Or, hey, if you go and drinking, you know, like, I'll come pick you up if you need a ride, but I'm not going with you because I don't want to get drunk.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Well, it's finding what your limit is, finding out what you want to get rid of. And that's why I think I had students write on these cards, because you're putting on pen, you're taking pen to paper and you're writing out, this is what I need to fix.
Yep.
And I think that's the first step. Figuring out, okay, what do I need to fix? You realize, oh, I slipped up, called my pastor, hey, and that's the second step, acknowledging it to somebody else.
Right.
And that's why I said during this message, I said, first you need to figure out what it is, because we all got something.
Yeah.
Everybody's got something.
We all
And then
compromise somehow.
Yes, and then the second thing you got to do is you got to then deal with it. And I think that's the hard part, is now that students have acknowledged what it is that they are doing wrong, whether it's cussing, drinking, vaping, maybe if their thoughts in their head, which sometimes we can't control those, but we can do something about it. How do we then do the second step and act on it? How do we deal with it? How do we stop it? How do we put up boundaries to not do that anymore? Does that make sense?
Well, the act part is the scariest part, I think.
Oh,
Because
100%.
now you have to admit it and you have to deal with it.
Right.
If you can't admit it, you'll never be able to deal with it.
Nope.
And if you can't deal with it, you'll never overcome it.
Right.
You'll have to compromise in your morals and your standards and the things that you have planned out for your life, for the things that you want to walk out. I think knowing who you are and what you want out of life helps you balance that out to the point where I think it makes it easier to be able to say, okay, wait a minute, I'm getting off course, or hey, this isn't what God's called me to do. Like, this doesn't line up with who I am or who I
Right.
want to be.
Right.
If it doesn't, then you have to make adjustments.
Right.
It's like saying you want to be a police officer, but you're running with gang members.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Doesn't
you
make
really don't
sense.
want to become a police
No.
officer because you would be putting yourself in that position.
Right.
Because if you end up with the charge, you're not going to be able to reach the things that you want to do.
Right.
So you have to set a standard for yourself and be able to say, hey, look, man, I like you and I know that you're down with these gangs and stuff, whatever. You know, like, I'll catch you at my house on the weekends if you want to come over, get away from all that stuff. But as far as me, I can't roll with you.
Right.
You know, and that's just so hard, especially for, I think, teenagers, or even for those that don't really know who they are.
Right.
A lack of identity, I think, is so dangerous to a person.
Right.
Not knowing who you are, not knowing where you fit in,
Right.
not knowing what you're supposed to be doing. So you're like, just,
Experiment.
roll with it.
You
Let
experiment.
me just see. Yeah, exactly.
Let me just
Let me
look.
see if this works for me, or let me see if that works for me, or everybody else is vaping, maybe that'll help,
Yeah.
or, and it's like, just because something works for somebody else doesn't mean it's for you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that could go with anything.
Yeah.
Just because you see somebody else going down a certain path doesn't mean that that's the path for you to go down.
Right.
You have to choose what life you want for yourself, and
Right.
you have to work hard at making that so.
Right.
Like, you have to work hard at it.
Yeah.
It's like saying, you want to be a bodybuilder, but you don't want to go to the gym and work out. Well, you don't want to be a bodybuilder then.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The
Like,
work to get where you want.
Exactly.
And I think that's just what I think this generation is missing the most, is that they get so caught up in the idea of peer pressure, and I think that keeps them where they're at.
I think too, it's easier to just go along with the peer pressure
Yeah.
than it is to stand against it,
Right.
because it's lonely.
Yeah.
Sometimes it is lonely saying, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah. It's
Or
much
sometimes
easier.
even saying like, hey, I'm not judging you or nothing, but I'm not going down this road.
Right.
Or, hey, I think that this is dangerous, so I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
You could really impact somebody's life that way too, because then it
100%.
make them look at,
Mm-hmm.
man, okay, why did they say that? Like, I
Mhm.
respect this person, I like this person, like, all of a sudden, wow, they don't want to do that no more? Like, I don't get it. Like, what's up?
Yeah.
And that could really impact more people, by you standing up and having integrity, could really be a bigger eye-opening than you just going along.
Right.
Because everybody else is just going along.
Right. Well, you know what? I just thought of this idea and it popped into my head, and I think I've heard it from somewhere before. But nothing easy is actually probably good for you. If it's hard,
That makes sense.
it's probably good for you.
Eating ice cream every day is easy.
Yeah, and that's what I'm
It's
thinking.
not
Of.
healthy for you.
Definitely not healthy for you. But that's what I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
Following the crowd, it's easy.
Oh, it's so much easier.
So easy. But going against the crowd is hard. But see, so going with the crowd is easy, but it's not going to be beneficial for you.
So how do you raise the standard?
Exactly. Because it's going to be, when it's hard for your life, when something's hard to do,
It's going to cost you everything.
it's costing you everything, but it's also building that integrity in you. It's building your moral
and it's going to gain
ground.
you everything.
And it's going to get you everything. And I think that's the hard part, is we want to take the easy road. Students want to take the easy route because it's easy.
Yeah, yeah.
Humans do. Not even students. Humans do. We do.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody wants to find the easy way out. We want to find the easy road. We want to find the easy path. But that's not the path that's going to strengthen us. That's not the path that's going to lead us to where God has us,
Yeah.
And I think that's where we need to go, like, where students just need to go against the crowd, so that way that they can fight against that, so that they can strengthen themselves and that they can keep pushing forward.
No, for sure. everybody wants to run a 5K, but nobody wants to walk a block.
Nope.
It's like you can't do it.
No.
You have to get up, you have to start walking, you have to start running, you have to kick in that consistency so that it could build up endurance.
And I think consistency is the huge word that you just said, because I feel like I've preached this so many times, is that students or people will try it one time. We'll try for one day not to cuss. We'll try one day not to think negatively, or we'll try one day not to have suicidal thoughts. And if God doesn't answer us in one day,
We give up.
we give up and we're done. Well, it's like, well, that's not even worth it. But I think God works if you work. And the thing about working is you can't just do it for one day. You can't show up to your job for one day and expect to get the pay raise.
Right.
You can't show up to your job for one day and expect your boss's praises, but you never show up the week after. It's the same thing with God. God's not going to give you everything in the world if you only show up one day and say, I'll try for one day. Because then that's an act of testing God. And God says, don't test me.
Yeah.
Do not test me. Have faith in me. And I think that's just the consistency aspect that a lot of us miss, is that we want to have God do something in our life. We want all of these things to disappear. We want these to be gone. We don't want to cuss anymore. We don't want to vape anymore. We don't want to do drugs anymore. But then we do it for maybe a day, and then we give up. I remember I preached the week after I had students write this card, and I said, I guarantee you some of you tried this week to not do these things, and you failed. And I saw so many heads go, yep, I tried and I failed. But it's consistency. It's how can we be consistent?
They say it takes 30 to 45 days to build a habit. So you can only imagine how much more it takes to break one.
Exactly. And we have so many things in here that I think students are looking to break. And so we got a few minutes. Let's break down some of these. I think one of the biggest things we saw in here was cussing. What's your talk on cussing? Where you stand on that?
That's dangerous. I'll tell you. Let's talk about it. So, I came out of a real fast life in New York, and out there, if you don't drop an F-bomb, you're just not talking.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like every other word is an F-bomb. You know, and it's just the culture of it. You know what I mean? Like it was so hard. Like when I go to New York at times, my wife would be like, when we first started going to New York, she's like a total different person or up there. I'm like, well, no, because I don't want to get mugged or messed with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have to walk the walk so that people know. Oh, he's from New York, like leave him alone.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I said, so yeah, I do walk different, I do talk different, I do act different because it's the culture and the environment that I'm around.
Right.
So I had the same heart, so I had the same goals. I felt like I needed to do that as a mechanism of defense.
Right.
I also used to think that, so with that I used to curse a lot.
Yeah.
And in order for me to get out of it, one thing that I started doing with my students that we were teaching through the program that we were running at the shop was every time you heard somebody cuss, you would yell out green apple.
Okay.
And everybody would say green apple, and you're like, what did I say? And they were like, you did this, you said this. And I was like, oh, my bad,
Yeah.
So like, green apple was like a telltale of, dude, you said it again, without really being offensive or degrading to somebody.
Right.
It was just to bring you attention that you said it.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh man. And it really helped a lot as far as breaking that habit.
Yeah.
Because you noticed how much you did it. You know what I mean? And it was like, man, I gotta chill out. I gotta cut this out. Now, a while back, my thought on cursing was, and this is where don't take this as advice for yourself.
Oh, here we go.
This is just where I was at. To me, curse in the Bible was like, I hope you get leprosy and die. Like that was a curse. Back then, that was a curse.
Yeah.
So when they says, like don't cuss in the Bible, I'm like, back then they didn't have F-bombs and, they just didn't have that. So how could they say that that's cussing? You know what I mean? It does say don't let any crude language come out of you. I hear that and I get that today.
Yeah.
But then my thing on cursing was, if I'm in Puerto Rico or in Spain, I'm going to speak Spanish.
Yeah.
If I'm in Italy, I'm going to speak Italian.
Right.
If I'm out here on these streets, I'm going to talk streets.
Yeah.
So if I have to catch somebody's attention, and if an F-bomb has to drop for them to be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
I used to think that was the way that I would just reach people.
Right.
But over time, I come to learn that I could still reach those people without having to do that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And when I started like focusing more on that, I really saw God open up more opportunities and more doors, easier way for me to reach people. Because then they were like, "Yo, but you know, like you're cool with this lifestyle, and you like you know a lot about it, but you're not about it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm not about that life anymore because I got delivered." You know what I mean? God literally converted my heart.
Right.
You know, so like cursing is like it's like a lazy thing to do. Like when you have nothing else to do or say, like you're just gonna drop a F-bomb or whatever just to like fill in space.
Right.
If you listen to these rappers these days, like all they're doing is just like filling in space. They could actually rap those raps without them, and I think it would sound just as clean, you know, just as tight. But it's so common and so desensitized today that a lot of people are just like, oh, well, it's just lingo, it's just slang, it's just this. But I can guarantee you that when you're standing before God, you're not going to drop a F-bomb.
Right.
I promise you not. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
you're going to be
sure.
on your P's and Q's, and you're going to be like, no, let me make sure that, boy, I ain't saying nothing out of line. It's kind of like when your grandpa comes over. You know what I mean? Like, you ain't dropping an F-bomb in front of grandpa because you're going to catch that backhand.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
so, like,
true. Don't choose not
I
to
tell
do it.
people, live your life like if you're on your grandparents or on your future kids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you want your kids to know?
What do you want them to see, and how? What do you want them to say about you? Oh, he was a pothead, or you know, all he did was cuss, or you know, he used to beat people up, or.
Well, and I think one of the things that you said that really just drew my attention is that, yes, you could have said it on the streets to fit in, right? To fit in and try to then teach them about the gospel and stuff. But I think what's interesting is that I think God wants to use people who will stand out and look different. Because it's so easy. When I see somebody cussing, I was like, oh, they're just trying to fit in. When rappers are doing it, they're just trying to be like every other rapper. And when I see or hear students doing it, I'm just like, they're just doing it because they want to fit in. Because that's what I did. They want to be cool. When I was in high school, that's what I did. I cussed to be cool.
They want to seem tough.
I cussed to be funny. Like, that was the main reason I did it, because I thought it was funny, and I thought people laughed at me when I did it. And I think we get into this trap of where we're then just now fitting in. When it's like, God's not going to use you if you just fit in.
Yeah.
Because those people that you're hanging out with aren't going to see a difference. If you're going over there to some of your friends and saying, hey, you should come to church with me, it's really effing awesome, or it's the... They're going to be like,
wait,
but why would I go... You go to church, I act the same way you do, so why do I need to waste my time going to church?
Right.
But if you go to that same group and you're like, bro, you guys should come to church with me, it's really awesome, and they're like, oh, I'm not effing going to that, and you're like, no, bro, you should really like check it out, and you're chill with them, and you don't use the same language and tone and attitude that they would maybe use, people will eventually see a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what you said, is that the people on the streets, they saw that. They respect it more. And it's not saying that you can't, I mean, I slip up and cuss still to this day.
Yeah.
I still do it. And people do it all the time, and if we're going to be honest, I do it more than once a day probably. Should I do it? No. God convicts me on that all the time. But I think we should not be doing it where we're using it on other people.
Right.
And that's a big thing. I think we like to use it on other people.
Yeah.
We like to use it when we're talking about people. And I think that's probably where students are at. And I don't know what they say about cussing and what they technically do, but I think it's just not language you would want to use.
It's not something that you would use to build somebody up.
No.
It's to tear somebody down.
Right.
Or to make something seem like it's just less than or not important.
Right.
It's so degrading.
Yeah.
And God doesn't want that.
And to me it looks bad. Like it's almost like soap in the mouth. When I hear or see other people doing it, more often than they should, it just makes you look bad. And I'm not trying to degrade anybody that cusses. I'm not trying to make you feel bad, but that's a conviction thing. It really looks bad to people that see you doing it. They're like, bro, come on. Like, there's other ways you can say that. There's a different way you can do that. And I think it's not healthy for yourself. And I think if you want to find that healthy lifestyle for yourself, you need to try to cut back on those things. And I found a healthier version probably of myself when I chose to stop saying those words on a consistent basis.
Yeah.
Because I used to do it enough to where it was enough. And when I realized I didn't have to say those things, I eventually stopped saying them, and the habit just went away.
Yeah. And people take you more serious.
Exactly. People
Because
will
they
take
don't
you
think
more
you're
serious.
so, oh, he's not being casual, wait a minute, he's
Right.
saying something. Like,
Right.
what's he saying?
Exactly.
Or what was it that made you change, or what changed
Mhm.
you? Another thing too is like, I think people get real convicted by, oh, well, I'm not going to church, dude, are you kidding me? I cuss too much.
Right.
Like, or I'm not going to church, I vape, or I'm not going to church, I get high on the weekends.
Right.
Listen, God doesn't care about that.
Exactly.
God just wants you to show up as you are.
Yep.
He doesn't say like, that's like saying, oh, I'm gonna take a bath before I take a shower. Like, no, you get in there as dirty as you are,
Yep.
and you bathe yourself. Like,
Yep.
and that's it.
Yep.
So you come to church as dirty as you are, and
Yep.
let God heal you from that.
Mhm.
I heard a pastor say this one time, and I was like, oh, that's so good though. He said, this kid came up to me, he says, Pastor, I want to come to church, and I want to get saved, but I don't want to stop smoking weed. And he goes, well then don't. And he's like, wait, what? He's like, come to God, and if he wants that from you, guess what? He'll take that desire from you,
Yeah.
and he'll change it whenever you're ready.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I thought, man, that is so cool. Like,
Yep.
come as you are, regardless of,
Mhm.
and let God heal you and change you and touch you.
Mhm.
Because we could preach at you all day long. We could even be on you all day long.
Mhm.
And until you're ready to change, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
So if we let you grow on your own, and we let you bump your head every once in a while, we're there to help pick you up
Yep.
and guide you through it or whatever. When God says enough is enough,
Yep.
guess what? You'll never touch it again.
Nope.
Because
Never.
he said it was enough.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So like, I think that we need to realize that although we go through all these things, like, we can't get to a point where we're so convicted, ashamed, or feel so dirty that we can't come to God.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where some churches make mistakes.
Yeah, they're like, oh, well, no, you
We don't-
drink, or
we don't want you
Yeah.
until you're perfect.
you got a girlfriend, like, you're having
Yeah.
sex, you're doing this, like,
Exactly.
and it's like, man,
Nope.
like, you're just throwing them away, like, you're
Nope.
telling them, like, you're not good enough to be saved.
Yep. And that's not the case at all. And I think as we kind of close out this episode, talking about that, because I think there's a stack of cards here where people probably think,
I'm not good enough.
I'm not good enough. I have no
I don't
value.
qualify.
I don't qualify. God can't use me
Look
because
at all
of
the people
this.
God used in the
Oh
Bible.
my gosh, bro! Don't even. He used, what was his name? King David.
David.
He did.
He was not only did was he a murderer,
Yep.
but he actually literally had an affair
Yep.
with somebody that was fighting for him,
Yep.
and then set them out to get killed.
Yep.
So like, I mean, and God still did amazing things through him. You have Moses, he used to stutter, like
Yep.
he was not confident in himself. He always doubted himself.
Well,
He
let's talk about
stuttered. He
the
murmured.
first one, Adam and Eve,
Yeah,
the very first sin.
right.
God
exactly.
told him not to eat of the fruit of the tree of
That's the
good and
only
evil.
thing. He had one commandment.
One
Don't eat
commandment.
of this tree.
And he did it.
The rest
He
of the
ate it.
world is yours. Just
Yeah.
don't eat of this tree.
And ate the one tree he shouldn't have ate. So we all have stuff.
Yeah.
But the thing that's beautiful about it is that God will still use you
Yep.
no matter what.
Yep.
Only if you come to Him. Only if you present yourself to Him.
Yeah.
And it's like what you said, and you preached what I feel like I say every single Wednesday and Sunday, is that we can say whatever we want to say. We can talk
Yeah.
the talk all day long. We can do podcast after podcast. We can do a podcast every single day
Until
instead of
God
just Friday.
sets that in your heart.
But until you decide,
Yep.
until God really is starting
This
to
is my
change
day.
and convict you, there's nothing that we can say that can do anything, because students and people, you have to be willing to make that change yourself.
For yourself.
For yourself. So if you want to stop cussing, you got to make that change to stop cussing.
But
you
the
gotta
cool thing
find-
is you don't have to do it by yourself.
No, you don't. That's where the church comes in. That's where people come in, because this church, at least Riverside Community Church, is a church that will accept you no matter what you do. You can smell like weed. You can have just gone to the club last night. You can be high in the middle of service.
Yep.
We don't care. But as long as you're here, that's all we care about. Because then we can help you on this journey. We can navigate this journey with you.
Yep.
And that's the beautifulness of Jesus, because that's what He did.
This guy said one time, he said, instead of praying that I change, why don't you sit at the foot of the cross with me until Jesus changes me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm like, wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. Because humans can't change anybody. We can't do anything.
We can want it all day for you.
All day. We can
And
pray all
until
day
you're
long.
willing to receive it,
Yeah.
it don't matter.
And that's the hard part, I think, at least in student ministry, I'll give you a little insight into student ministry for those of you watching or listening, is that I think that's the hard thing, because sometimes I feel like it takes students a little longer to want it. And I will admit to that, because when I was a student, it took me a long time to realize that I needed it. Like a long time.
Yeah.
People were around me. I say I didn't have people around me. I had people around me who were trying to invest into me. I had people in my life who were trying to lead me to a church youth group, trying to lead me to a better life. And I didn't want it. And so it took me a while to realize, man, I need this to change. And it took me probably well until after high school to realize that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hard part about student ministry, is that you can see the potential in students. You can see the potential in people, but they just don't see it for themselves, nor do they want it yet.
Yeah, they don't want to receive it yet.
And that's the sad thing, because I want students to want it themselves. Because I like I said, I can preach every Wednesday what God can do for you. We can share our stories, what God has done for us. But there's nothing that's going to be beneficial to anybody until they decide to make that change themselves.
And the way that they actually do that, or the one way they can do it, is by having integrity in their life, and like setting that standard for themselves, so that they can build themselves up to be able to be confident enough to be who they are, who God's called them to be.
Yes. And it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of effort.
It does
And
a lot.
energy. But the beautiful thing is that when you do take that energy and you take that work and you begin to do something about it, and you begin to work on your life, you begin to work on vaping, cussing, sexual desires, suicidal thoughts, whatever else is in these cards, and you decide to work on it every single day, give it to God every single day, the crazy thing that's going to happen is that God's going to move.
Yeah.
And God's actually going to take it from you when you start to move and when you start to do something.
Absolutely.
And you're going to be preaching one day when you're older and saying what God did in your life. And that's the beautiful side of just what I think God can do in so many students' lives, and what he can do in every person's life, and what he's done in our life,
Right.
and what we've seen him do in our life. And so
Absolutely.
we're praying for every student, just anybody actually I should say, that's watching this or listening to this, and we hope this was beneficial to you. And I guess what we'll say just as we close is that if you need anything, if you need prayer for anything, if you're walking through something that you're dealing with that you need help with,
Write it in the comments or reach out.
write it into the comments, reach out to us, whatever you got to do to find that community to help you navigate what it is that you're walking through.
Amen.
And so we love you. We're excited. Hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah.